So, what would be the mapping of trade diplomacy as it is true for globalization since 1980s, and then contextualizing Donald Trump's tariff regime, whereby higher tariffs have been practiced with partner countries, trading partner countries. For example, it is true for Canada, Europe, it is true for China, it is true for India, and it is true for many Latin American countries as well, and African countries, uh, as well as it is also true for Russia. I mean, though America and Russia would not trade significantly, but still, Russia is American trade partner. It is an interesting then conjecture to then reorient the work of World Trade Organization, whereby one can say, make a very common generalization that let's have all countries, both developed and developing countries, work on their industrial sector. But then, how would international trade would happen? Would it happen first through regional trading agreements? Or would it have a more globalized perspective? If every country has a robust industrial sector, and robust industrial sector would mean that there would be value addition and there would be technological advancements, and would be meeting the standards of technology and innovation across the world, then there would be no need to trade in the first place. It is similar that every developing and developed country have a thriving financial sector and services sector, especially oriented towards education services or telecommunication services or financial services. Can it happen the same? This trade diplomacy would create an answer. There could be a new trade theory, motivated from the classical trade theory and the concept of specialization. How about WTO directing global supply chains and global value chains to then reorient trade patterns, whereby certain specialization clusters across the world are formed and promoted, while at the same time there needs to be a thriving global consumer class which needs to be consuming all the industrial products that are being produced. So that is what I mean from trade diplomacy, reorienting the works of World Trade Organization, reinventing global value chains, while inherently every country needs to have a right, but then be guided through WTO rules and regulations to follow certain specializations within industrial sector. And that specialization would allow more regional trade, while at the same time would facilitate global trade as well. It's an interesting idea. I mean, the framework of specialization would be complex, but we know that thousands of products are traded across the world. Latin America is as much developed as Africa or Asia to then create economic value that is justified in 21st century, but at the same time having a thriving services sector with secondary markets and a robust banking sector. So indeed, entrepreneurship can be promoted to then allow a thriving industrial base across the world for all countries, while a new theory that will promote specialization across regions, understanding and motivated from the information that is derived through global value chains, could be the start of new globalization, my friends. And yes, for that, for making such a policy, you need research think tanks, you need global institutions of international governance, and you need governments of the sovereign states to then negotiate and cooperate. But at the same time, universities and academics could add value to that international trade theory, which is, as classical trade theory be oriented towards the concept of specialization. But that specialization would inherently be about global value chains and how they are constructed and how they would be reinvented, rather than specialization in factor endowments, which is labor intensive or capital intensive production patterns. That's trade diplomacy, how I would put it. And indeed, you know, Brazil, India, and China would then utilize trade diplomacy to then allow more peaceful resolutions for all the conflicting areas, including the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Even India imports significantly from Russia. And of course, there should be great economic relationships between Russia and China. While at the same time, media would cover that, there is some kind of a competition as well between Russia and China in international markets, trading markets, and a diverging interest. But yet, using trade diplomacy would then transform foreign policy and diplomacy to then allow for peaceful resolutions for conflicting areas, for areas in the world where there is national and international conflict, but at the same time reinventing certain economic paradigms that will define robust institutional frameworks as an outcome of policy making and expertise within the policy making world that would facilitate social, economic, political, and legal development through initiatives that would empower the society and further link between society and the markets, and make government an effective regulator while at the same time facilitator of social empowerment.